Good evening, humans. Tonight I have another dark near-death experience. This is based on a true event. A man burned in an industrial accident. Let's go to the story. He never should have survived the accident. One moment he was at work checking a pressure gauge like he had done 1,000 times. The next, a fuel line ruptured and the world exploded into fire. When he was dragged out, his clothes were melted to his skin, and the smell of burnt flesh clung to the air long after the flames were gone. By the time he reached the hospital burn unit, he was barely conscious, wrapped in hastily applied dressings, smoke still curling from his hair. Nurses shouted orders over one another as they pushed him down the hallway. And even through the pain, he sensed something deeper, something waiting. Later, he wouldn't remember the moment his heart stopped, but everyone else in the ICU remembered the sound, the long, unbroken beep of the monitor as his body went still. Doctors rushed in, chest compressions, medication, the harsh command to clear the room for a shock. 30 seconds of violent, then suddenly he came back, but he didn't return like most patients. He didn't gasp, didn't look confused, didn't ask where he was. He woke up screaming, "Don't let me go back, don't let me, please don't send me back there." The nurses froze. No one had said anything about back where. No one had asked him to go anywhere, but the terror in his voice wasn't something you could fake. When he finally calmed, his words trembled. His words trembled out of him like a confession. He said he had floated above his own body, watched the doctors working on him, but before he could understand what was happening, he felt something pull him backward. Like a hook lodged deep inside him, he fell, not onto a floor, not onto anything solid, but into darkness. A darkness so complete it felt thick, aware of him, almost curious. He hadn't been alone there. The whispers reached him first, hundreds, maybe thousands, all around him. They moved like breath on the back of his neck, gathering into faint faces made of smoke. Their mouths didn't move, but he heard them laughing and mocking him. He tried to run, but he couldn't move. He tried to scream, but he had no voice. He wasn't standing or floating. He simply was frozen in a void that felt alive. And then when the shadows drew close enough for him to feel their presence seeping into him, he was slammed back into his body. He hadn't escaped the darkness. He had been torn out of it. Hours later, he died again. This time the team fought harder. His burned chest heaved under each compression, and the defibrillator crackled through the dim ICU lighting. On the third shock, he jolted awake, eyes wide and full of pain. But the terror returned instantly. "They're waiting for me," he choked out. "If I die again, they'll take me." He shook uncontrollably, tears streaking down his soot-stained face. Nurses held him down gently, whispering reassurances they didn't believe themselves. When he could finally speak, he told them what had happened during his second death. He hadn't simply fallen into the void, he had landed among them. Tall shapes emerged from the black, thin, stretched silhouettes with no eyes, until they opened. Glowing white circles stared at him from featureless faces, dozens, maybe more. They stood in a ring around him, closing the circle. One lean close, bending wrong, its form twisting in ways a body shouldn't, and in a soundless whisper that pierced straight through him, it said, "You're home." Hands cold, impossibly cold, wrapped around his limbs, his chest, his throat. Not hands made of flesh, but of smoke and shadow, like living night. They began to drag him downward, deeper into a place below the void, a place he couldn't see but felt in his bones. He fought, but he was weightless. He screamed, but the void swallowed every sound. He was only a thought, terrified, helpless. The last thing he saw before waking again was rows of glowing eyes staring down at him as he was pulled into a pit of nothingness. The third time his heart stopped, he didn't scream when he came back. He whispered, "They saw me." They were smiling this time. The nurses kept the lights on around the clock because he refuses to sleep. Every time he drifted off, he jerked awake, drenched in sweat, begging them not to let him fall back into the darkness. "I wasn't in hell," he told one nurse softly, his voice fraying at the edges. "Hell has fire. Hell has something. This place, it had nothing. Nothing forever." When he finally stabilized enough to go home, he left the hospital with bandages wrapped around most of his body and a lamp clutched under his arm. He never stepped into a dark room again, and for the rest of his life he maintained one chilling belief. If his heart had stopped for even a few seconds longer, he wouldn't have come back. He would have stayed there, in the void, with them, forever. That was scary. For more stories like this, like and subscribe. Have a spooky night and scary nightmares.